Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
And good morning to you. I must begin with a warning that I am unhappily receiving a message on my screen here that says that YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Never mind that we're not doing video, but I think that means that this might be a sort of iffy connection. So if I drop out, that's why. When that does happen, usually I come sputtering back at some point. So I'll just ask all of us to be patient. I suspect most of us awakened to the unhappy news today of the death of Pope Francis, and I liked that man. I liked that he seemed like a man, like a human, instead of some, otherworldly monarch with immense power and surrounded by all this pomp and ceremony. He just seemed so relatable. And I'm just sorry that one of the last humans he encountered in his stay on Earth had to be the loathsome Vice President of the United States, who quite clearly the Pope was not a big fan of. Looking at some of what's been written about him, the thing that is so, he was more accessible. A reason that I, and I'm sure so many others, feel that we sort of knew him in a way and could relate to him is because, unlike other popes, he made himself accessible to media. And through media, we then came to know him more. And journalists loved him because of his accessibility. I was reading something today by a journalist who covered his papacy, how every time the Pope was traveling somewhere, and man, did this guy schlep. He worked it. I mean, he was really indefatigable in serving the church, in, working. And even old and infirm, he was doing these long trips. And he would always come back to the media that traveled with him, to the reporters on the plane. And the reporter said how he would walk up and down the aisle greeting every single journalist by name and engaging them in a personal manner. How do you not like that guy? And it was one of his first press conferences. I don't know what he called them, but when he opened himself up to questions, and he was asked, somebody asked him something about gay priests, and his response, which was a question itself, was just blew people away, because his response was, "Who am I to judge?" Uh, that blew the minds of obvious conservatives in the church, thinking, "Who are you to judge? You're the Pope." And it blew the minds of gay people, and it blew the humility of the question was mind blowing in every way. Who am I to judge? I loved him from that moment. Um, and I pointed out that clearly he was not a fan of J.D. Vance, and he was not a fan of Donald Trump. And one of the last words we didn't hear him speak, but that he wrote, they were spoken instead by one of his aides with a stronger voice. But after meeting Vance, he did go out amazingly against doctor's orders and thrilled the people gathered there in St. Peter's Square because he wanted to deliver the Easter address. And it was another, as I said, person who read it out loud. But one of the things that he said in it is this. So some of the last words from this Pope. The act of deporting people who in many cases have left. No, that's not it. That wasn't it. That was in a recent letter, sorry, to American bishops. I'll read it anyway. The act of deporting people who in many cases have left their own land for reasons of extreme poverty, insecurity, exploitation, persecution, or serious deterioration of the environment damages the dignity of men and women and entire families and places them in a state of particular vulnerability and defenselessness. Right there, he made clear to the conservative American bishops that Trump's deportation policies were the farthest thing from Christ-like, and they were not Christian. But here's what I was looking for. Some of his last words delivered by the archbishop, who was his aide. This is a speech called, I don't know Latin, Urbi et Orbi, from Rome to the world. And it is the annual Easter speech. And in it, yesterday, he said this, our now late Pope. How much contempt is stirred up at times toward the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants. I appeal to all those in positions of political responsibility in our world not to yield to the logic of fear, which only leads to isolation from others, but rather to use the resources available to help the needy, to fight hunger, and to encourage initiatives that promote development. These are the weapons of peace, weapons that build the future instead of sowing seeds of death. Those were his words shortly after spending a few minutes with our vile vice president, who is in total disagreement with those words, who sows fear, who deports families, who turns away the stranger, who takes food and shelter from the poor, and aid to the struggling. Again, I just want to say how awful it is that the last 24 hours of this wondrous Pope's life had to be sullied by being in the company of J.D. Vance. One other thing, I'm sure you've all read or listened to a lot of things about the Pope, but one other thing that blew me away is how, unlike most of his predecessors, he didn't live in the fancy schmancy 10-room apartment area of the Vatican that overlooked Saint Peter's Square. He was not comfortable in that kind of opulence. Instead, he lived in a boarding house behind a gas station. He didn't wear the fancy red slippers. He wore his scuffed old black shoes. And when he became the Pope, within the first 24 hours, one of the things he did is he got on the phone, which other popes never did. He dialed the number himself, which other popes never did. And he called his hometown newspaper in Buenos Aires, Argentina, to cancel his subscription. I mourn the passing of this man, of this imperfect man, of this good man. And I hope he stuffed enough cardinals like Trump doing to the Supreme Court. I hope he stuffed enough cardinals like himself, if there are any, um, into the college that will choose the man who will replace him. What a good man. You know, I'm I sit here and I'm surrounded by things out of newspapers that I've ripped out that with highlighted areas, with scraps of paper, notes I've taken, um, and and it's gotten to be such a mess because of the mess of the reality we're living in, because of the chaos, intentional chaos sowed by this administration, that I had a brilliant idea just yesterday looking at the mess on what is my dining room table and desk. And I thought you just need to stick it in folders, at least get it organized. So I thought, okay, I'll organize it. And here are my folder titles. I mean, there could be more, but it just gets some of it under control. The first folder I did label chaos. And in chaos, I have things like the thing is here is so many things could go in so many different folders, but in my chaos folder, I did have this that the acting commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service has been yanked just 3 days after having been installed. This is classic for the well-oiled machinery of this clown car of a presidency. A guy named Gary Shapley had just been put, and they're all acting. Nobody ever even nobody stays long enough to even get rubber stamped by the Republican-controlled Senate. This guy was replacing another acting head of the IRS. And a new person has already been installed to be the acting head of the IRS. And let me mention, I mean, something you know, this being April 21st, that this is all during the busiest time of the Internal Revenue Service, when it's been inundated with good Americans, sending in their taxes. So 3 days after he appoints this guy, he yanks him. And it turns out he is the third, you won't even believe this, I think. The new guy, whose name is Faulkender, don't bother, you know, remembering that because he'll be out by noon, I imagine. Faulkender says right here in the paper of record, the New York Times, will be the third acting head of the Internal Revenue Service this week. I wish they'd gone back a few more weeks so we would have the entire number. We have had in April 3 acting heads of the IRS in 1 week. Understandably, I put that in my chaos folder. Now, I also have an incompetence folder, but I chose to put it in chaos. It could easily have gone in incompetence. And by the way, just an addendum, where do I have these numbers? Hang on. Oh, in this busy season for this agency, the IRS, about 22,000, no small number, about 22,000 of its employees have said they will accept Trump's latest resignation offer for them to leave the IRS. That is on top of the 5,000 that already have left. So in toto, that would be 27,000 IRS employees who do the work will not be there to do the work. well, I should add to that, 27,003. I'll add in the 3 commissioners, ex-acting commissioners who've been in and out as well. And that is just some of the chaos. Believe me, as well you know, just some. And I also have I have a folder for chaos. I have a folder for incompetence. I have a folder for cruelty, because these are the headings that so many of the reports coming out of this administration just very easily and clearly fall into. On the cruelty front, and coming after the Pope's words of helping the struggling and the hungry. There was an article about our pulling of all aid from the ravaged, starving people of Sudan. We have. And they're dying. And the article I read is one of those articles that is so hard to read that I suspect most people just give up. I'll give you 3 sentences. Abdo, an 18-month-old boy, had been rushed to a clinic by his mother. His ribs protruded from his withered body. The next day, a doctor laid him out on a blanket with a teddy bear motif. His eyes closed. Like the other 11 children there, Abdo starved to death. President Trump froze all U.S. foreign assistance. Over 300 soup kitchens within days were forced to close. Sudan is easily the world's worst humanitarian crisis in decades. You wouldn't know that, of course, given how media only have eyes for Gaza. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have eyes for Gaza, but you can imagine if you were a starving child or a desperate mother in Sudan, you might wonder why all those big-hearted students in the United States didn't care about you. Okay, there was that. That one's under cruelty. Here's another under cruelty. I'll just give you the headline. White House weighs steep cuts to housing vouchers for poor families. You know, sure, why not? You want to get money to your billionaire pals, you got to get it somewhere. And those poor people, they got all the money. And then there was this story I hadn't heard about how the schools in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, um, are have tons of lead in them, and kids are getting lead poisoning, sort of like Flint, Michigan stuff. All hell's breaking loose there. And it's such a system-wide problem. These are old schools, generally. Lead pipes, lead in paint, all this kind of stuff. And of course, the superintendent and the health people in Milwaukee turned immediately to the Center for Disease Control, which is where school districts in similar situations, of course, would have turned. And Milwaukee did that. And weeks ago, the commissioner of the Milwaukee Health Department was told that the toxicologist and epidemiologist from the CDC, both lead experts, oh no, both, excuse me, led experts, yeah, both led experts who were expected to assist Milwaukee officials with their response had been fired. There was nobody there with the expertise to help them. And then, as if that wasn't enough, the Milwaukee Health Department was dealt an even sharper blow. Its request for federal assistance from the CDC to help manage the crisis. There is an actual program in place called EpiAid. That request was formally denied. No help coming. The kids in Sudan, the kids in Milwaukee. I don't know if you're thinking what I'm thinking. Probably have something in common, and that they might be mostly Black. And that takes me to a front page story in the Times today. State Department plans for big cuts. Draft order would shed Africa operations. This draft plan includes eliminating almost all of our State Department operations in the entire continent of Africa, shutting down embassies, consulates, let alone any aid. This is the kind of thing that China and our enemies could not dream of. China is all over Africa using its soft power to create alliances there, to gain access to, stuff like mineral wealth. And we are going to turn our back on an entire continent. The one with all those shithole countries. I believe I'm quoting our president. Okay. So, and I just to let you know, some of my other folders are okay. So I have chaos, I have cruelty, I have incompetence, I have courts. Man, that's a big fat one right now. Right now, because yeah, stuff's a happening in the courts. And I also have one where I put two together: greed and corruption. It's not the kind of headings I would have had for pretty much any other administration. I would have had things like foreign policy, domestic policy. But here, this is what you get. There was a piece in the Atlantic by Peter Weiner that talked about how, and it's a little disconcerting because he's talking about the reality of autocracies, which we're now getting to understand on a very real level. Um, and he talks about when they become a little wobbly, when they face crises, as this one already is, with its looming large confrontation with the only other branch of government which is still functioning at all, and that would be the judiciary. And what happens when a government that is run by these evil people, and they are, when they get, feeling a little cornered? I just have a few things that I pulled from it. Um, he has a term for them: vindictive narcissists. Seems to apply. Vindictive narcissists like Trump hold grudges, harbor resentments, blame everything on someone else, and weaponize information. Hey, tell us something we don't know. They have a mean, even sadistic side, belittling others to feel better about themselves, and using, abusing, and discarding people. This is also right on the money, this description. That again, it begs the question that troubles me so, is how did so many people, millions upon millions, even people we know, maybe people we love, maybe people I how could they support and continue to support someone who can be described in that manner? And has shown himself that that is an apt description. It's like I said, it's a way as even a child, how I could understand how there could be this evil person, Adolf Hitler. What I couldn't comprehend was how there could be so many millions of people who would look on him with adulation and would follow him. It's the people who scare me to death. This Peter Weiner goes on to say about people like Trump, but I'm afraid you have to then figure it's not unlike the people who support him. Empathy is, to them, an alien quality. And when they begin to feel like the walls are closing in, when their external validation, their sense of superiority and grandiosity are threatened, when they experience setbacks or humiliating public failures, they can approach what is known as narcissistic collapse. And this can lead to intense feelings of rage and acts of aggression, to agitation and to increased impulsivity and distortions of reality. That's a scary thought. What he's telling us is that when people like Trump start feeling a little cornered, they only get more so. They get angrier. They get more impulsive. They get more dangerous. So he says this. So As the, whoop, where'd you go, baby? Oh, dang it. I'm sorry. Well, dang it. I hate this. You know how you're holding your phone and then you accidentally, your finger twitches or something and there it goes. Hang on, I'll get it. I'm getting it. Here it is. Okay. So, as the second Trump administration careens from one failure to another, I mean, we have to understand that, you know, three acting heads of the IRS in 1 week would, in any other time, in any other administration, be the biggest news imaginable for its obvious trumpeting of chaos and incompetence. And you probably didn't even read of that one because there's too many others. So, as this administration careens from one failure to another, and as unhappiness with the president rises, as events and reality refuse to bend to his will, he will become darker and crueler and more unstable. His advisors, all of whom are afraid to stand up to him, will enable him. And the MAGA movement, his base, more cult like than ever, more walled off from reality than ever, will stay with him until the end. Leaders who have been worse, more ruthless, and more skilled than Trump have been stopped. And few nations have been blessed by a system of government as resilient as what our founders created. Many of our institutions still are stronger than those in other nations. So Trump is hardly invincible, he says. And many millions of Americans will not give up without a fight. This is his hopefulness. And he says, my hope and expectation is that those Americans will prevail, that America will prevail, but it will come at quite a cost. It didn't have to be this way. There are 77,302,580 co-authors of this catastrophe. Those who voted for him, many of whom will never admit to it, many of whom will, when it becomes the right thing to do, will disown him. I will never forgive. I cannot. As this guy ends his piece, he says, they have left a crimson stain on our republic. Indeed. Milton writes, I've been saying for months that because Trump is too inept to succeed and too emotionally immature to accept his inevitable public failures, he will end humanity as his failures mount. Well, it is the dangerous, most dangerous thing of having elected a sick, soulless man like this, that as he flails around when his ineptitude catches up to him, that he'll take everything down. Rust Belt writes, Trump is proof you don't have to be smart to be rich. Oh, that's for sure in the US. Just have a daddy that leaves you tons of money and a lot of business connections. Yeah. Yeah. So David Brooks wrote a piece that is getting a lot of attention. I'm thinking a lot of you might have read it too, because it's getting a lot of attention. It appeared Friday in the New York Times. And David Brooks, as you may well know, I think began as a moderate kind of Republican. Who the heck knows how he would categorize himself now, but he's a bright man, a thoughtful man. And for David Brooks to have written this piece is really something, because he calls essentially for a revolution. Yeah, he does. In fact, it is titled Time for a Civic Uprising. Okay, I'm going to read just a little bit of it to you that I highlighted to give you the essence, because I think when the David Brooks of the world start writing this kind of thing, um, we know we're in different territory. Why did my screen just go kaplooey? Oh, go away. I don't want you. I don't want what? Guys, I've lost my screen. I lost my connection to you. I can't see the chat. It's been absconded with. It's been, and I'm so afraid of pressing something that I think will get rid of it, because the whole thing will go. So, oh, now it's gotten even worse. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do, because I screwed up. I'm somehow getting the National Aviary. Don't ask me. God damn it. How did City Paper take over my friggin'? Damn it. Okay, never mind. Okay, let me just read this to you. And I'm sorry, I can't see your stuff. I don't know what's going on. And since we just got like 15 minutes left, I'll just keep going. Okay, forgive me. But I think when somebody like David Brooks writes something like this, yeah, we should listen to it, because he ain't a bomb thrower. Trumpism is about ego, appetite, and acquisitiveness, and is driven by a primal aversion to the higher elements of the human spirit, such as learning, compassion, scientific wonder, the pursuit of justice. I'm skipping here, so it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to read beautifully, because I'm not going to read his whole thing to you. He talks about the damage, the destruction that's occurred in just 3 months. And he says how some of us are fighting the one fight for science or fighting the fight for education. And he says, so far, each sector that Trump has assaulted has responded independently, like the law firms seeking to protect themselves, the universities separately trying to do the same. And this is a disastrous strategy that ensures that Trump will trample on one victim after another. He will divide and conquer. Slowly, too slowly, many of us are realizing that we need to band together. So far, he writes, the only real hint of something larger, a mass counter movement, has been the rallies led by Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know why he's not mentioning all the folks who've come out to other rallies. But he says this too, Bernie and AOC, this too is an ineffective way to respond to Trump. Those partisan rallies make this fight seem like a normal contest between Democrats and Republicans. And what is happening now is not normal politics. We're seeing an assault on the fundamental institutions of our civic life, things we should all swear loyalty to. Democrats, Republicans, independents, whatever. It is time, he writes, for a comprehensive national civic uprising that does not look political. That's my addition. It needs to be an uprising of all the people. It is time, he said, for Americans in universities, in the law, in business, in nonprofits, in the scientific community, and civil servants and beyond to form one coordinated mass movement. Trump is about power. The only way he's going to be stopped is if he's confronted by some movement that possesses rival power. Got to start thinking differently. And movements like this huge, have many different tools. And some of those are already being employed. They have lawsuits, they have mass rallies, they have strikes, they have work slowdowns, they have boycotts, and other forms of non-cooperation and resistance. All successful movements like this began small and built up. They developed clear messages that appealed to a large variety of groups. Sometimes they use nonviolent means to provoke the regime into taking violent action, which shocks the nation, undercuts the regime's authority, and further strengthens the movement. Think of the civil rights movement at Selma. Now, this is where it gets scary. He's saying some people might have to get hurt. Some people might have to die. This is how serious it is. Right now, Trumpism is dividing civil society. If done right, this civic uprising can begin to divide the forces of Trumpism. He says we live in a country with catastrophically low levels of institutional trust. And if universities and the big law firms and media and corporate executives are going to participate in this mass civic uprising, as they must, they have to show the rest of us that they understand the sins that that gave rise to Trump in the first place. Sins often of their own making. They have to show that they are democratically seeking to reform their institutions. This is not just about defending the establishment. This is moving somewhere new. And then he goes on to talk about specifically the universities, because he has taught at university level for nearly 30 years. And he talks about the great work they do. But then he says this: they have their flaws. Many have allowed themselves to become shrouded in a stifling progressivism that tells half the country, your voices don't matter. Through admissions policies that favor rich kids, the elite universities have contributed to a diploma divide. If the same affluent families come out on top generation after generation, then no one should be surprised if the losers flip over the table. In other words, a civic uprising has to have a short-term vision and a long-term vision. Short-term, stop Trump. The second, longer-term vision is a vision of a fairer society that is not just hard on Trump, but harder on the causes of Trumpism. Whether it's the universities, the immigration system, the global economy, we cannot go back to the status quo that prevailed when Trump first rode down that elevator. David Brooks right, I'm really not a movement kind of guy. I don't naturally march in demonstrations or attend rallies, but this is what America must have right now. Trump is shackling the greatest institutions in American life, and we have nothing to lose but our chains. That last quote, unbelievably, is of course Marxian, but coming from David Brooks as a metaphor. And yeah, in as much as we encounter, I was at a retailer the other day and she was talking to me about how she feels like she's living in like two worlds. The world in her head, which is filled with fear, and the smiling regular world that, the regular world that we inhabit, that, goes about our business as it always was. And I said I totally understand. I mean, I was trying to come to terms with that disconnect I feel too, and how upsetting it is to encounter people who seem to totally be living in that other world, not acknowledging what's happening or the stakes. And I really think it's time that those people be confronted kindly, but we need to stop pampering them. We all have those people in our orbits. They are our friends, they are our family, and we need, again, in a kind, not a hectoring manner, but we need to just keep on explaining that old question from that wonderful old Union song, which side are you on, is the question that everybody must answer now. And you're either on Trump's side, which is the destruction of everything we have built and know, or you're on the side of those who want to resist that in any way that they can. And people have got to be held to account. They've just got to be. Um, and I saw something about one of the things that um, is helpful is humor. Don't ever lose your sense of humor. Um, in times like this, dark humor rises. And I read a piece, and again, I'm not clear about where, I can't remember, but here's a quote from cartoonist Dan Perkins, who's better known perhaps as Tom Tomorrow. And he talks about the fact that, you know, living in a collapsing democracy requires this kind of humor. He says it's a way of expressing solidarity in the face of overwhelming malice. Authoritarians depend on the appearance of inevitability, and satire and mockery help undermine that a little bit. Satire provides an outlet for both the creator of it and the reader of it to laugh at the malevolent incompetence of it all. There's a reason that Jews, after the Holocaust, were the greatest comedians in this country, and why Jewish humor has always been known as a kind of sardonic, ironic, dark humor, because Jews have lived under these kinds of conditions where if you don't laugh, you'll cry. And absurdity can seem like the only recourse at a time when reality is itself absurd. I mean, you know, parody. How does the Onion even survive now when the pages of mainstream media read like the Onion read 10 years ago? So humor can be a defense mechanism, but it can also be a way of mocking the sons of bitches who have put us here. Okay, sorry that I sort of lost contact with your chat, your phones, your everything. I can't see them. But I'm glad I think we didn't get disconnected altogether. So thank you for that. And I'll be back tomorrow, and Susan should be in tow, and we'll try to do this all again. God knows there's no end to the fodder available.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.